Hey, this is Phil with the Morris Writers, and today I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we create characters. Now, we have been playing role playing games forever. I have. My son just started recently, relatively speaking, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago. And the game system I like using the most is the hero system. It's very different than what you would get with like Dungeons and Dragons or any of these other ones out there because it really is good about balancing characters out. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit from the role playing game side and how that relates to the characters that we make in novels. So, we're going to translate the game mechanics into a narrative weight. So, in the hero system, we have points, and you have to balance these points out, and all the characters have the same number of points or thereabouts, close, so that they have the same sort of power level and such. So, highly expensive powers require players to take on severe disadvantages to balance their point budget. Now, when you're doing a novel, you've got the same sort of thing in novel mechanics because you have narrative weight that you're dealing with. In fiction, a highly influential asset, a massive superpower or extreme wealth, or demands something that's equally weighty narratively, a flaw to prevent the protagonist from becoming an unrelatable, tensionless Mary Sue or Gary Sue. So you look at it as the capabilities that the person has solves the problems, the limitations create the story. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the rationale. So, you've got the source. Uh, Before the traits, you have the rationale. Were they born great? Domestic family, a true mutant, power innate, birthright. Okay, we're talking about magic here. The narrative focus leads to legacy, prejudice, controlled inheritance, inherent nature. If they want to achieve greatness, this is physical training, technology, the powers earned through, working at it. The narrative focus changes to maintenance, human limits, sheer force of will. And then in the case of something that's thrust upon them, experimentation, powers accidental or forced, the narrative focus becomes bodily autonomy, trauma, learning to wield a dangerous gift. All right, so there are six building blocks of the character. You have their characteristics, that is, their innate physical, mental, their baseline, how quick they are, how strong they are, how smart they are. The skills, these are practical competencies, things that they've learned. They've gone to college, or they've had on the job training, or they're an acrobat. Then there's talent. These are rare genetic gifts, that kind of gives you a little bit of a boost. Then there's perks. Now, these are very societal sort of things, worldly sort of things. It could be wealth. You could have police powers or something like that. Then there's the magic or superpowers, impossible made real, things that break the laws of physics. And then we have the most fun part, which is disadvantages. And of course, we'll get to that last. And this is the structural stress points, the flaws, the vulnerabilities, and the narrative anchors. Okay, so characteristics. Now, in the game, you start out at 10 points, so that's a typical person. When they become competent, they're 14 to 20 points. And you can think of every time you add 5 points, you double an ability. Legendary is 21 to 30 points, and superhuman is above 30 points, okay? Now, this is important for you to have these scales to deal with because if your character's intelligence doesn't match their strength, if they are really, really strong but not super smart, they're going to punch their way. If they're super strong but they're not, or if they're not really strong but they're super smart, they're going to think their way out. Dexterity gives you added abilities in that as well. So these are very basic sort of things, and most authors have a one line or two about their character when they create them. Now, skills and talents. This is learned versus the innate abilities. So skills are practical, studied knowledge, the criminology, system operations, a knowledge skill about an area, or maybe they know physics, or maybe they know things about how people react to things. Maybe they know how to do illusions, not magical illusions, but as a magician sort of thing. That's a skill. Maybe they can pick a pocket, sleight of hand, that sort of thing. Now, talents are things that you can't just add in later. There are minor abilities, they're innate, that border on superhuman. Things like eidetic memory. They remember absolutely everything in minute detail. They have an absolute time sense. They don't need a watch, they know exactly what time it is. Or there could be a danger sense, something like that. All right, perks. This is social and world assets. So, we're going to talk about wealth. You can think of like Batman, super wealthy. He's a normal guy, but he's done a lot of training. He's got a lot of abilities and things that he's trained. He does not have the fringe benefit of having police powers. He has to call Commissioner Gordon to do that. Now, in a regular game, or not a regular game, but in a regular novel, these benefits also could be, a noble has some fringe benefits. Now, you also have followers. Those are perks as well. Followers could be sidekicks. They could be, it's often someone who's younger, less powerful than the partner, but they are consistently underestimated. It could be a pet is a sidekick, the one that's constantly following them around that ends up helping them out in the end. So that is perks. Now, powers and mysticism, engineering the impossible. All right. So we have fantasy stories, super stories, sci-fi. These are powers that are created either through mechanical means or their innate abilities, okay? Now, these, in order to make magic feel real, it must have a cost and an architecture. Limit your mystical characters by defining exactly how their powers manifest. Maybe it requires a gesture or an incantation. Can they be stopped by binding their hands or gagging them? Does it require concentration or extra time? Does it require a focus? It could be an amulet, a wand. It could be a gun, a special ray gun that has so many charges that ends up burning up when it's fired too long. That is still considered a power. Maybe it requires a skill roll. Maybe you need to know how to use the device in a very specific way. So those limitations help keep things grounded for your character, so they're just not overpowered. Okay, now let's get to the fun part, the engine of the story, the disadvantages. They're also called complications, okay? The golden rule of character design is powers solve problems, but disadvantages create the plot. So you need to balance their abilities, their superhuman assets, things that they have that other people don't, with their disadvantages. And they should balance out pretty well. So a true disadvantage must inconvenience the character constantly, okay? Not every single moment of the day, but it needs to come up often enough. If it only comes up once, then that's not an inconvenience. It's got to be something that happens more than once. And it could be in their public life or while they're at work or whatever. The mechanics of the flaws in an RPG, a player takes the disadvantages to pay for the powers and abilities. In a novel, the writer gives the character a disadvantage to earn the reader's empathy and to generate automatic story hooks. All right. Now here is some of our limitations that we're going to talk about, or disadvantages. Our psychological limitation, the internal compass. This is a defining code about the character. These are not preferences. They are absolute compulsions. These are things that the characters do. They must do. It could be the code of a hero, an absolute refusal to kill or harm innocents. Now, of course, a villain, your antagonist, will inevitably use this and create a hostage situation or something that would make it more difficult for your character. Your character must do this. They're about ready to capture your antagonist, and there's a little girl that's getting ready to be run over by a bus. What's the character going to do? They're going to save the girl. They're not just going to, well, that's it, poof. Now, it could also be a negative psychological limitation, even more so negative, like overconfidence. The character fundamentally underestimates threats and forces them into situations that they really aren't prepared for. This can be hilarious, it can be fun, it can be great. Now it could also be something even more negative, a vengeance, an obsession, an irrational drive to push a specific group, blinding the hero to some sort of broader danger. So those sorts of things can really make for great story turns and twists. Okay, a dependent non-player character. Now, that is the terminology that's used for a game. In the novel, it is like the frail relative that needs the protagonist to come and help them out. Maybe comes fairly often. Maybe it's your significant other, male, female, yeah, someone or something that requires constant supervision, or could be captured by your antagonist or the villain to cause problems. It could be as simple as the boss, someone that is very demanding, that's constantly interferes with other things that your protagonist wants to do. All right. Now, distinctive features and susceptibilities. Okay. This causes physical friction. Now, most people use this and they don't even realize it, that these distinctive features, it could be a mutation or a trait, change in the skin color, something that can cause a major social reaction, a prejudice, make it impossible to blend into the crowd. Maybe you have a dragonoid. I mean, you can't really hide the fact that you have wings, and I mean, you can kind of disguise that under a big cloak or something like that. But it could be something as mundane as, hey, you look like you're from a different area than here. Now, there's also susceptibilities and dependencies. This is a biological weakness, something like taking extra damage from something. Maybe your character lives in the water and has to return to the water every 4 hours or something like that, where they start taking extra damage. Now, it could also be something as simple as your character has seizures and they have to take medication on a regular basis in order to control the seizures. And in a portal fantasy, they get transported over to another world and they don't have their anti-seizure medication. That is a susceptibility or dependency. They're really dependent upon that medication. So how that can add a lot of extra friction to your character. All right, hunted and social limitations. Okay, these are external pressures. They're hunted by the enemies. Maybe they have a rivalry. Maybe they're hunted by the law. Maybe they have a public identity as someone that's famous, but they really want to be the artist in the back room, painting. So this can create a lot of extra things. Enemy assets and various things that can press in on the character. Rivalries are really good about this. You can have a character that is not necessarily your antagonist, but could be a deutagonist that is got a rivalry with your character, and they're constantly battling to who's going to do the best thing, who's going to save the day, so to speak. All right. So one of these things that you'll see is that there's a weaving that you can do with this. If you have a power like summoning extra dimensional creatures, but your character refuses to summon violent demons, well, they have a psychological limitation that they have the code of the hero sort of thing. Maybe they have a perk like a hidden sanctum, but they have a spouse that lives there. Well, that's a dependent non-player character, and the spouses can live in the hidden sanctum, but maybe they have to go out grocery shopping, and then your antagonist, captures them. Well, then you've got a nice story friction thing to go there. Maybe they have a danger sense, but it's constantly triggering. Maybe they're hunted by an offshoot of the government, a secret society, or the bad guy group that you have. So these powers, abilities, and all that need to balance out with your disadvantages. So, finalizing your character Bible. The blueprint review. You want to define your structural baseline, the characteristics and skills. Grant them the tools to change the world, their talents, their perks, their powers, and then shatter the foundation with heavy, load-bearing flaws, which are the disadvantages. Don't just give your characters the power to fly. Give them a fear of heights, a fragile tether to the ground, a hunter waiting in the clouds. Building the flaw and the story will write itself. So, if you have any suggestions, any comments or questions, put them down in the comments below. I would love to hear those. And if you want to, take a look at the hero system, it's a great game system. It's been out since 1981, I believe. And it's got this great ability to basically use points to balance your characters out. And we use them for all of our novels as well as playing games as well. So I've been Phil, and you've been watching Mars Riders, and thank you for watching.